So now that we have our segue set up between our contacts table view controller and our detail view controller, let's talk about how to actually pass over the information from what we tap on into our detail view controller. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back into our main.storyboard here. And because we have a label here, we need to create an outlet to this label that we can set dynamically according to whatever contact we select. So let's go ahead and open up our main.storyboard side by side with our contact detail view controller. And one way to do that is either by opening up the assistant editor here, or if you option click on a file, okay, so in this case we'll option click on contact detail view controller, it will open up the contact detail view controller here to the right. Okay, so let me make a little bit more space for myself here so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so we want to create an outlet for our contact name. Okay, so let's go ahead and control drag from our contact name and we'll insert it here, and we're going to call this contact label, and hit connect here. So now we've got that outlet to our contact label. Okay, well, what do I want my contact label to say? Well, I want it to be whatever it is, the contact that we passed over from our table view controller. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a property here on our contact detail view controller. Say variable contact of type string optional. Okay, so at least initially this contact isn't going to have any value, right? I need to pass, or I need to assign a value to contact from my UI table view controller. Okay, so once my view loads, I want my contact label to say whatever my contact string was, right? So in view did load, we're going to say self.contact label.text equals contact. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this out. We don't need this. Okay, so again, what we're saying here is as soon as my view loads, I want the contact label's text to be equal to whatever our contact is that we pass in. Okay, so now that begs the question, how are we going to pass something from our table view controller over to our contact detail view controller? Well, let's go ahead and open up our table view controller, and we can get rid of the assistant editor for now. If we scroll to the bottom, you see that we left one more method here that's called prepare for segue. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment this, and we'll uncomment this. So this prepare for segue, well, let's go ahead and read this description. In a storyboard based application, you will often want to do a little preparation before navigation. Okay, which is true, right? Before we actually navigate to our detail view controller, we'd like to make sure that it has a contact, right? We want to make sure that that label has a contact set up so that when it displays, it shows the exact contact that we selected. Okay, so this is the perfect method for us. So this is called whenever a segue is triggered, which we set up a segue in our main.storyboard. So this is going to be called when that segue is triggered. So let's go ahead and clear out this code, and this is what we're going to be implementing. Okay, so first off, we want to make sure that the segue that was triggered is the segue that we set up. Okay, so if you're in a more if you were in an application that had lots of different views and whatnot, you may have different segues. So you first want to check and make sure that your segue is the correct one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to say, well, actually, before we do that, in order to check the segue and make sure it's the right kind, we need to give our segue an identifier, which we forgot to do. So let's go ahead, let's hop back over to our main.storyboard. We're going to click on our segue here, and we need to give it an identifier so that whenever the prepare for segue method is hit, we can properly identify our segue. So let's go ahead and call this toDetailVC. Okay, so that's going to be our identifier, toDetailVC, to our detail view controller. So now if we go back over to contact or to our table view controller, let's check and we say if our segue argument here, if segue dot identifier is equal to detail VC, right, whatever we gave it, then what, right? Because we've got this condition here. So now we know that we're on the right segue, okay? And so what code do we want to run if the segue identifier is equal to our detail view controller, okay? Well, we want to create an instance of our detail view controller so that we can access that contact property, right? Because we have this contact property. So if I have an instance of contact detail view controller, I can also access that contact property, which is what I want to set, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to say if let detail VC is equal to our segue's destination, okay? So in main.storyboard, right, our destination view controller, the place where our segue goes to, is our contact detail view controller, okay? And because I've already run the condition and checked that we're on the right segue, I can have a lot of confidence that my destination view controller is going to be this contact detail view controller, right? So back over in our table view controller, we're going to say if let detail view controller equals segue.destination as contact detail view controller, okay? And we haven't talked about this, but what this is doing is this is casting our segue destination as a contact detail view controller, okay? Because initially our program isn't going to know what the segue's destination is. So this is our way of telling the application, hey, your segue destination is going to be a contact detail view controller, okay? And so now that my detail view controller is a contact detail view controller, I can access that contact property and I can set it, okay? So we're going to do if let detail view controller equals my segue.destination as contact detail view controller, okay? Well, I also need something else, right? Because we want to make sure that we're passing in the contact that I tap on, okay? So I also need the index path of whatever the user tapped, okay? So we're also going to say let index path equal our self.tableview dot index path, where is it? Index path for selected row, okay? So there's this method here that says an index path identifying the row and section of the selected row, okay? So I want my index path to be whatever the user tapped on, okay? So we've got our instance of our detail view controller, and now we have an index path, which is whatever the user tapped on. So with those two things, I can properly create my contact and pass it through to our detail view controller, okay? So let's go ahead and we're going to say let contact equal our self.contacts array, right? Our data source. And let's see, we want this to be, we're going to do index path for selected row dot row. We want an integer value, right? Because in order to use our subscript notation, we need an integer value, not just an index path, but an index path's row number, okay? So we're going to say index path equals self.tableview, the index path for the selected row, and then the row number, okay? So now we can create our contact. We can say let contact equal self.contactArray, and we want to select the contact that is at our index path. And now with our contact and with our detail view controller, I can call my detail view controller, and if I start typing this, you'll see that detail view controller is of type contact detail view controller, okay? And that's a result of us casting it. So because we have an instance of my contact detail view controller, so we'll do detail VC dot, you can see that now we have access to that contact, okay? So now I can set the detail view controller's contact to be equal to our contact here that we just created with our index path, okay, for whatever the user selected. So detail view controller dot contact is equal to contact, and we know that as soon as this loads, it's going to set the contact label dot text equal to that contact. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this code. And we should see that when we select a contact here, that it properly sets our label on our detail view controller. Okay, so we've got Caleb, Caleb, Rachel, Rachel, Julia, Julia. Okay, so that is how we can set up this navigation between our two different screens and pass information from one to the other is by using that prepare for segue method. Okay, so take some time to really study out this prepare for segue method and really try to understand what's going on here. I know that a lot of it is new stuff that we haven't really talked about, especially this casting. But again, a quick overview is first we check to make sure that we have the right segue, okay, which we gave our segue an identifier. Next, we need to create an instance of our detail view controller so that we can access that contact property. Okay, so we're going to unwrap our segue.destination as contact detail view controller and set that to detail view controller. We're also going to find the index path for whatever row was selected in our table view. And then using that row, we're going to create a contact object using subscript notation and accessing that index path in our contact array. Okay, so if the user taps on the second row, then it's going to access the second element in our contact array, right? And it's going to give that value to our contact, and then we're setting our detail view controller's contact property equal to contact.